I'm going to get started. Just a couple of logistics. We've got a brief presentation that I'm going to provide a summary of the proposed rezoning that we are here to share with you this evening. But I want to spend a lot of time addressing any questions, hearing your comments. We're going to be recording all of those. The Deputy Planning Manager, Hank Kelly, in the back, Alexis DeLeo, City Planner, are going to be recording your comments or feedback. We'll answer as many questions as we can. If we can't answer a question, we'll write it down and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Before we get started, I do want to recognize a couple of our ward council reps who are here this evening. Council Member Lynn Song and Council Member Chris Watson. Would you like to share any words before we kick off?
Sure. I brought some materials. A couple weeks ago, we had an event downtown called Parking Day, where local groups took over parking spots and had different activities. For our parking spot, I had the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board committee members come out and take shifts. We spoke about the housing crisis. So I have materials from that event up. If you're wondering why there's a marked difference and like how nice those posters look, which Brett and his staff made, and these boards, that explains it. But we also have handouts in the back explaining the affordable housing village, what the money has been used for, and then some materials on what is being worked on our public parcels. So it's not directly TC-1 related, but I figured we're going to have a conversation about housing, and if you're curious as to what the city is doing with our public parcels, this is a quick overview, as well as the challenges we face on average median income and the monthly housing costs. And if you really want to get into the weeds, I bring this with me everywhere, which is the housing affordability and economic equity analysis that the county did in 2015. For the folks who are on the board for Avalon Housing, I'm sure you have this memorized. But it's good work, and I think, Brett, you said that it's going to be updated if we land some HUD funding.
That's part of the activities that we're looking at, to maybe do an update of that document to some things have happened in the world since 2015.
A couple of things. So, and then just apologies in advance on Chris and I are both on the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board. We actually have a committee meeting at 6:30.
Yeah, so for that, we decided, we drew straws, and I'm going to run off to the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board meeting. Lynn's going to stay here, but both of our cards are on the back, so any questions, comments, you can email us, you know where to find us, so thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I just wonder, are our Ward 1 representatives here tonight?
I have not seen them. No.
I think Lisa actually has I think there was a conflict. Yeah.
A bigger conflict than being here with us?
I think for her work, for her job at the university.
And Cynthia?
I think Cynthia's actually out of town. This morning we had an event with the university on planning, so. But we can certainly convey.
No. I'd like our reps to be here. I think it's appropriate that they be here.
We'll be sharing all the feedback through the whole process too, so it's not just these reps. All the city council members, planning commissioners will get the notes and responses and comments that we take in at these meetings. So. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming. I guess you're here, I hope you're here, because you're interested in hearing a little bit more about the proposed TC-1 zoning along the Plymouth Road corridor. So we're going to cover what that geography is, talk to you a little bit about that district, what the process looks like. Can't hear? Can everybody hear me okay?
No, speak up.
Will you, for those of us who are ignorant in the crowd, explain who you are?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I am Brett Leonard. I am the planning manager for the City of Ann Arbor.
So you are appointed.
I am an employee of the city. Yes.
An appointed employee?
Employee. I'm
Yes.
hired by the city.
Good, thank you.
Yes.
What is planning?
Planning Services is the department in the city that is responsible for comprehensive planning. So that is the documents that set forth the policy about how our land use and infrastructure investment should happen over time, how we want the city to evolve and change. We also review all development. So that's everything from large scale, multi-story residential developments to your building permit for a garage or a shed in your backyard. and everything in between. So that's what the planning department does. We work closely with the building department, all the departments across the city, particularly on development review. We sort of quarterback that process as the planning department. So when a development proposal comes in, we work with departments across the city to make sure it meets all the city's standards and expectations that are memorialized in our city code. Also, just to reintroduce, Deputy Planning Manager Hank Kelly is in the back.
Good evening.
And City Planner Alexis DeLeo is here as well. So these are the proposed areas, and I hope some of you got a chance to see some of these on the boards before you, as you were coming in. If not, they'll be up for a while. They're also on the website. But generally, what the proposed area is all the areas that are zoned similarly now. So the geography that you're seeing is the coalescing of commercial districts, C2, C3, office districts, some planned unit development districts along this corridor. It does not include residential zoning districts. The TC-1 is intended to replace districts that already allow similar uses with different forms and different development potential.
Wait, Brett, don't move on. Okay. Just for a broad global orientation.
Oh, thank you.
I'm tripping over nothing. At the very top of the screen, you can see a little bit of yellow. That outlines the 23 Plymouth Road interchange. And so that's right in the corner. And then, so this is the east side of Plymouth Road. Plymouth runs down the center here. This is Huron Parkway. Here is Nixon Road, Kroger is here. This is coming down. Traverwood Boulevard is going to be right here. And then here is Upland and Murphin. So little global spatial awareness.
This area is 99 parcels, 145 acres. The average parcel size in this area is about 1.5 acres. The largest parcel in this area is nearby the EPA testing facility at 14 acres. The smallest parcel is a tiny little city-owned parcel at the corner of Plymouth and Green, which is 0.3 acres in this area. And so just going into a quick summary of some of the sub-geographies. So this is the Upland Murphin area. Again, when you're seeing C3, C1B, C1, those are commercial districts. And our TC-1 district, which was created in 2021, that replicates all those similar uses. The uses in the C1 are very similar to what is allowed in the TC-1. Commercial, office uses, residential uses are all permitted. Again, the TC-1 is a change in form requirements, not use requirements in any substantial way. Similarly, this is sort of the central section, so where you've got Traverwood, we talked about the EPA site, you've got the Kroger property, you've got office, commercial districts. Again, only those commercial and office districts and those that are immediately adjacent to the Plymouth Road corridor.
What does changing form mean?
We'll get to that. Generally, it means it allows for more floor area because the TC-1 doesn't limit floor area like some of the other districts do. And it also pushes buildings closer to the transit corridor to encourage more pedestrian opportunities for people to access those spaces by transit and other means of transportation. And it also maximizes the amount of parking that you can provide on the site. It maximizes both the total parking and the surface parking that you can put on the site. So this is the area closest to 23, as Alexa so helpfully oriented to us. Some larger, deeper parcels in this area, but again, PUD, commercial, one R5, which is a hotel district. So that is included. Hotels are permitted using the TC-1. But again, you'll see it's omitting the University of Michigan property because our zoning ordinance doesn't apply to the University of Michigan. They are independent, are not subject to our regulatory framework.
I have one question real quick.
Yeah.
This is the one that's probably on a lot of people's mind.
Sure.
And conspicuously missing. What's the height restriction?
Well, I'll get to that. It depends on how close you are to residential. So as you get further away from residential zone property, the height can get up to 300 feet high. But as you get closer,
How many stories?
30.
that could be 29 to 30 stories, probably.
It's
No.
ridiculous.
Yep. And it would only apply in one of these geographies.
It's so ridiculous.
We're taking the notes. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, I understand that the little caveat was put in when that code was changed that said if a developer requests it, they can have a 30% increase, which means a 39-story building.
Yeah, that's not a caveat that was put in with that. That's a code requirement or a code incentive that is across the city. In every zoning district across the city, we provide a 30% height increase if you commit to 15% of your units to be affordable, or if your building is 60% of the roof, correct me if I'm wrong, 60% of your rooftop is covered with solar collectors, and the building is fully electric or electric ready.
And no one has actually exercised that.
No one's exercised it.
Yeah, possible. It's possible.
It's possible across the city. It's not specific to TC-1. So this is a summary of those districts. Again, you're not seeing residential districts. This is replacing similarly suited districts for the same use categories as TC-1.
Then what are the differences?
What are the differences?
Yeah, why are we doing this?
So some of the differences in some of these commercial districts, for example, service stations, automobile service stations are permitted uses. The TC-1 doesn't allow that. In some of these districts, the automobile repair and automobile sales are permitted uses. The TC-1 limits those to a special exception use. Another difference is in districts like the office, or the office district, the maximum FAR is
75%.
75%. FAR, just to set the stage, that's floor area ratio. And so when we're talking about 75% or 100%, 100% floor area ratio would be a building that its square footage is exactly the same size as the lot. So if you had a 1 acre lot and you have a 1 acre building, you have a 100% floor area ratio. If you had a 2-story 1 acre building, that'd be 200%. Our current FAR restriction in the office district is 75, so the most you could cover is 75% of the floor area of the size of that lot. The TC-1 does not have that limitation. It is strictly governed by height and setbacks like many other districts in the city.
So in the new category, you said that like service stations wouldn't be allowed, gas stations, but does that mean that those that are there already can stay there? Or?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
No new ones?
No.
Okay.
Zoning is prospective. When we make a change to zoning, like say your house is 5 feet from the side property line, and the city changes that requirement to say houses in that zone now have to be 10 feet from the side property line. That does not mean that you have to go in and chop 5 feet off your house.
Okay.
It's prospective, so new buildings that are built in that area have to be that scale.
Okay.
The same thing would apply to a gas station.
Okay.
But it would limit their ability to expand.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Could we just go back and have you be more clear about the subject you were talking about before, about the footprint of the building and the space?
Sure.
So if you're saying, if you had an acre lot, the footprint of the building would be what? What setbacks are being covered in this TC-1? You don't build up to the property line, right?
No, it's a way of scaling the square foot of the building relative to the lot size.
Okay, so if you had a one acre lot,
Yeah.
what would be the maximum footprint of the building?
In the TC-1.
Yes. Yeah.
So it would have to meet setbacks, so it likely wouldn't be a 1 acre footprint at that point.
What kind of setbacks?
There, 0 to 15.
It is coming.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, we have
Yeah.
slides on all this. We've have had public meetings in the past couple of years for the State and Eisenhower area, for the for the West Stadium area. We kind of know what questions you have, and we have prepared. This will be our third area of the city that we are proposing at City Council's direction. So we will, I don't want to cut anyone off with questions, but we anticipated a lot of your questions, and we'll be getting to them.
Yeah. But I do want to make sure you understand the floor area ratio concept. Is everybody clear on that? Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like paving paradise and putting up a parking lot though, isn't it?
Well, this is actually what we're trying to lessen.
Yeah, what's happening now in a lot of these corridors is you have expansive paved surface parking lots that are largely underutilized. And that is a way that is potential to put that to a more productive use. That
Could you
could be.
point out some examples of that in our corridor? It's a pretty vital corridor.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I mean, Kroger, a lot of times the parking lot is almost full.
That's true.
So,
What are these big parking lots that are empty all the time?
so if you look here at this behind the Holiday Inn, this, you can see the cart there. If you see this
That's the
around the
Holiday Inn. We
bushes.
don't, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the vital
This is the
retail
bushes.
things that
Lots
we,
of open parking spaces.
where's
That
that?
when I shop there.
I'm just looking at this. This is one snapshot of the use of that parking lot.
That's pretty full.
So it also means if anything in the future is built, we will want to reduce the number of parking spots.
The TC-1, let's say maximum, the TC-1 emphasizes buildings over parking. It says, let's do what we can to take an area like this and put more productive floor space in it for people, businesses, than cars. And to do that in a place that is close to transit so people can successfully access those places, access their homes, access services without reliance on a corresponding surface parking lot that stores 1 or 2 cars for every one of those people.
So a good example is living above Sweetwater, living above that corner of Plymouth and Green, right? Housing above retail.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of examples of sort of mixed uses throughout town. Yes, sir.
This, I think, can take a yes or no answer. Is it a stated purpose of this plan to deter the use of private vehicles?
No.
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 Really?
No.
I did a little research this afternoon and found that that was actually to be one of the purposes, is to deter the use of private vehicles in this area. Is that a mistake?
The purpose is to provide a choice for you to choose to use your vehicle or choose some other mode.
That doesn't answer my question. Is the purpose and objective to deter the use of private vehicles in this part of Ann Arbor?
No. The purpose is to provide more choice to you. So you have, right now, many people on this corridor have one choice of transportation. This is a land use pattern that's seeking to open up more choices to that, including vehicular use, but also transit use, also non-motorized use.
Huh. So with increased population, you foresee that there will not be an increase in the need for gas stations or mechanical service stations?
We're actually doing a lot to incentivize EV parking so we can help the infrastructure and the adoption rate of EV vehicles at a much higher rate.
Once again, you didn't answer the question.
I don't know how else to answer it. It is not to prevent you from driving your car. It is to provide land use choices so you can choose other ways to access the same locations without a vehicle.
And it will make it more difficult to obtain service or gasoline for those vehicles if there are more people in these more densely populated buildings who might have cars, but they don't have access to an increase in the number of service stations to service or fuel.
The TC-1 makes opening new auto repair facilities and new service stations more difficult. That is true.
Then I think you've answered the question that a foreseeable effect of this is to diminish the use of private vehicles.
No. The city council talks about that all the time.
No one's taking my name.
Nobody's,
Stick around, you can keep it, you just can't drive it.
Wouldn't that actually limit the ability for someone to develop a service station to charge electric cars?
electric cars can actually charge at any parking space which is permitted in the TC-1 zone. You don't need a service station for that.
Like, I see a potential if electric cars really caught in, that gas stations might want to redevelop into charging stations. And I would hate to see
Those wouldn't-
that not be possible.
I think it would, who knows where that industry goes, but so far that industry has responded by actually integrating those chargers in other uses, not dedicating separate land uses just for that purpose. That could happen, but now that is not what the market and industry is doing. Right now it's integrating that into your home, into your business, into the places you shop.
Brett, can you move on to the other, are you going to?
May we just get this, I have a question and so does this lady, before you get any deeper into it.
Why don't we let him finish his talk?
Yeah, let me-
Could you keep going?
So, let me get to this presentation. So as I said, we can provide a lot of time for questions and answers. So the Plymouth Road corridor is a transit corridor. So as you can see, this is the ride system area map. There are three routes that are along this route. They range from 15-minute to 30-minute peak time service, so they're very viable. The more businesses and density that starts to develop along a corridor like that, the more that will support that transit. That transit will then become more viable, it'll become more frequent, and it'll become more reliable for people to use that as a viable choice. That's more difficult when you're talking about a bus that comes every half hour or every hour. So the TC-1 district, this was created in 2020, January 21, I think, that's when it was actually adopted, June of 21. So from 2020 to where we are today, we've made a lot of progress. We've created a district that is modeled off of a lot of districts that have been on the city's books for a long period of time. We've established it, we've rezoned 2 corridors. This is the 3rd corridor that we're looking at, and on the heels of this, we're going to be holding a similar meeting and analysis of the Washtenaw Avenue. So right now, that's where we are. In June, the city council told me, as my bosses, we want to prioritize the rezoning of this corridor, and probably not as quickly as everybody hopes, but that's where we are today. As I talked about, this district is intended to support regular fixed service transit corridors. It's to support redevelopment and infill. It recognizes that a lot of these automobile-oriented corridors that have developed over the last 50, 60, 100 years are very auto-centric. They often have small footprint buildings and large parking lots. And TC-1 is a potential way to make more productive use of those sites, for those corridors to sort of collectively do more for our community. As I said, very similar uses that are permissible in the commercial districts again, residential, office, retail, hotels, testing. If you compare those existing districts, it's very similar, again, with some of the notable differences of automobile-oriented uses to the districts that we are proposing to rezone. The TC-1 goes further than a lot of our other districts and puts a lot of standards into it. I talked about the parking. This is the only district that we have in the city that across the district has a maximum parking. We have some other parking maximums by uses, but this is across the category. A maximum space of 1 per 333 square feet of building, and your surface parking can't be bigger than your building. You have to emphasize the building use over the surface parking lot. We have requirements on minimizing curb cuts. We have requirements that your building has to speak to the street so it's comfortable. So if you use transit, you have access to engage with that building, to enter that building from the transit corridor. There's requirements that on particularly large sites, we want that to be broken up into block-like functions so that it doesn't seem so massive, so suburban perhaps. Building dimension maximums, sidewalks. We talked about parking lot, thank you. Parking lot has to be secondary. Parking lot can't be your experience from the public realm. It has to be behind the building. So we want to engage with the use. We want to engage with the residences. We want to engage with the businesses there. We don't want them to be set back, so our community experience for not only vehicles, but also pedestrians, bicyclists, transit users, is active, productive space, not
What does that development arrangement mean about the block size? Right there, number 4.
If you have a very large site, we want it to be broken up into accessible blocks. So I don't know if anybody has ever been like down Telegraph Road off of like 696. You have these massive office. We don't want that experience. For you as a pedestrian to be walking and trying to walk from one of those offices to the restaurant down the road, going through this massive sea of parking, we want that broken up to feel more pedestrian and human in scale. So if you have a large site, you're going to have to structure that in a way that's broken up.
What do you mean broken up? How's that going to affect the distance that one walks from where one can park if you can find a parking space, which is going to be diminished?
So if you imagine right now.
Imagine downtown.
Yeah, if you imagine right now,
That's not an answer.
if
Oh,
you,
that's
if
the
you
model.
imagine right now the Arborland or the Kroger Traverwood Shopping Center right now, and if you flip it and you put those buildings right near the street in the parking lot in the back, I guess you don't even need to flip it, but imagine there is a restaurant behind Kroger. And right now you would have to walk around that entire building to get to the restaurant because you parked in the front and it's right behind Kroger. Our requirement is that each individual building can be no more than 250 feet on its width. If it's an exact square, the diagonal dimension would be 360. So you just need to break it up and put a sidewalk. It doesn't necessarily need to be a road in between, but you need to break up that building and put a sidewalk so that you can get past Kroger to the restaurant where you want to go if you parked in front.
And that's modeled
And that's
over.
all that, you don't need to do a land division. You can have the same developer develop it, but that long Kroger building or the long Arborland building needs to be broken up with spacing so that you can get to the buildings behind it or in front, vice versa. That's all it means.
Is it foreseeable or intended that the result of this program will be to diminish the amount of parking?
Yes,
Yes.
And it will.
yes.
But this is, of course, not, as you have told us, intended to deter the use of vehicles. It's just that you can drive, but you can't park them when you get where you want to go.
All that parking's not being used.
Will there still be enough parking?
So that was a big debate when those maxims were being established. And the way that was set, I mentioned 1 per 333 square feet. That's across the board. That's actually pretty small amount for an office use. Right now, a lot of office users are, they're occupying office space at a much denser way. Sometimes their leases might even have minimums that we need a minimum of X parking spaces per X square feet of office space. That's on the aggressive side for office. That is 3 parking spaces for a 1,000 square foot apartment. That's pretty generous on the apartment side. So the intention is that aggregating all of those uses, that was where that is. So honestly, time will tell if that needs to be adjusted or not, but that's where that number came from.
You know, if you do all this, you increase the density of businesses,
There's more people there, more people.
where do you think these people are coming from? They're not taking a bus from down the road. They're driving a car
They're
into
coming
this
from
area.
Plymouth
We live
and
in it. We
Brighton
know how many.
and Mile.
I watch
80,000
cars
people
pour
are
in
coming
here.
into the city to work pre-COVID every day. 80,000 people.
Yeah.
I know, I watch them come in. Where are they gonna park?
Well, if you allow an opportunity for them to live closer, some of them will not drive in at all.
They can't afford to live here.
Exactly.
And part of the problem is
Oh,
scarcity.
you're talking about a few hundreds of people. We're talking about thousands of us who live in this area. And all we're watching is you're gonna.
Not all those 80,000, I agree, not all those 80,000 people are going to, we're not going to be able to provide housing for all of them.
And I'm
But part of it is
talking-
providing
I'm
more
talking
housing
about
and
you're
more
gonna
choice.
increase the amount of business without increasing any place for those people to go once they get here, for their vehicles to go. But they're not gonna be taking a commuter bus from Plymouth to come into Ann Arbor to work. They're gonna be driving their car
Can you
in.
clarify what you mean by increasing business?
You said you wanted to increase the density and make more businesses in these areas.
More people. More people.
People don't drive cars.
More people, they're
What
coming
are the,
from out of
what are
town.
the
More
people
residents.
doing? What are these more people doing in your vision?
More living here. And
Where? Not
they're
along the
living-
Plymouth corridor.
They're living along the Plymouth corridor. They're able to live there with fewer vehicles than they have now. The corridor is evolving in such a way that they don't need that car to access their basic services,
Your dream.
to access their
So
job.
your proposal is more of those big ugly apartments like you built at the corner of Broadway and Plymouth, and put those down here. You would allow those buildings here. They're god awful ugly,
Mixed use.
and a lot of people.
Yeah, we don't,
And they take up the whole footprint.
as much as I would love to review architecture, the city doesn't review architecture. We establish codes of building height, setbacks, density, building codes. We do not regulate the architectural style of that. I don't know if your issue is the height or
The height and the
style.
setback.
So,
You've
but
got
that
that
is-
all over town. It's awful.
The transit corridors are a very viable place for that type of housing density because it provides that housing density in a place that doesn't have to accompany a ton of services.
So the object is to increase the population of the city.
The city's population is increasing.
Yes, it may be, but the object here is to encourage it by establishing high-density residential areas along the corridor. Isn't that true?
I think, yeah, more neighbors is
Of
great.
course it's true. Look around you. The people in this room, take a look around you. What do you see? You see a lot of white hair. You know why? Because a lot of the people in this room and who live up in this part of town are, dare I say, elderly, older, okay? And guess what? We use our private cars to get around, which is a hell of a lot more efficient for us, a hell of a lot more convenient. I'm glad you're amused. Keep that grin on your face.
Sir, I'm not amused.
Why are
We're
you
not-
so aggressive? Cool it! Let him talk.
We're
I
not-
thought I had the floor. Forgive me, sir. I'm not the guy with the white hair. Here's the
I'm not
thing.
proposing to take away your vehicle.
No, you're just going to make it less
Your neighbor-
convenient for us to use them.
Sir, you might get to a point where you can't drive, and we want to make sure you have opportunities to access the community the same way that you do now. And if it's all vehicular centric, you won't have the same options. You might, because you might be in a position where you have friends or family or the resources to be able to do that, but that is not uniform across our community. And providing more viable choices for people to be able to access different places in our community with different means is really important for aging in place across the board.
I will just say this, the presentation is structured, we wanted to give a lot of background and common understanding about what the TC-1 district is. But I will explain that this is a district that has been created, it's on the books. And what we've been asked to do was propose a rezoning of some areas along Plymouth Road. So really the real purpose of this meeting is just to go over those boundaries. I get the sense there's a few that would like these boundaries to be shrunk before being proposed, or even maybe eliminated, but we were charged with drawing on the map where the rezoning should go. We can explain the minimums and maximums and the permitted uses of the district, but those are not being proposed to change, increase, decrease. It's a district that is on the books, and the city council asked us identify lines on a map, and so we can move through the presentation, but this is kind of the gist of the feedback that we are looking for. Have we picked the right spots? Have we over-proposed, under-proposed? Is there a particular parcel that should be included, excluded? But that is really the gist. That is what we've been charged with by city council, is to rezone on the map. And we can fully explain, like I said, the permitted uses, whether this is a good idea or not a good idea. But what we've been asked to do is put forth a rezoning. And the way the process will work is it will go before the planning commission. They'll make a recommendation, and then it'll go before the city council. So we are presenting what we're sending to the planning commission for them to review.
Clarification, one quick question about this. Several times this has been referred to by the speakers as proposed rezoning. Okay, does that mean that it's still subject to revision, or is this the deal?
Yes, precisely.
We are just starting the process of
Yes.
rezoning.
This is step one.
We are here to hear from you whether or not this is right or not. Last question, then I'm going to get through the presentation. After this question, I'm going to ignore all of you until we get through the rezoning.
That's what I was going to ask. How long is your presentation uninterrupted?
Like
How
5 to
fast do
10
you want us
minutes.
to go? Or slow?
And I have a question after that.
Okay, thank you. So there,
While you're on this slide, could you explain that a little better?
yeah, so there was a question about setbacks. Setbacks are 0 to 15
In the front.
in the front. That's along Plymouth, 30 feet from the rear. When abutting a residential district, 0 when not. No side yard setbacks. And then the height is variable depending on how far it is from our residential zoning zone district. So if it is, there's a 30-foot setback when adjacent to any residential. So from a property line on a developing parcel, 0 to 30 feet, no building.
But
30 to 80 feet.
building, but parking isn't counted as building, right? Or-
Correct.
Or
Correct.
sidewalks and all the
Correct.
things that are.
That could be in that space, but not a building.
So, like, if you had this zoning and then right behind it you have R1 residential, you'd have to have 30 feet between the
Building.
commercial building and
The
Property
the
line.
property line that abuts the
Exactly.
R1 zone.
Yeah, which is very comparable to what those setbacks are in those
Yes.
districts right now.
Kind of like that right now.
Yeah. Then up to from 30 to 80 feet, it's a maximum building height of 55 feet. From 80 to 300 feet, a maximum building height of 75 feet. From 300 to 1,000 feet, a maximum building height of 120 feet. Of these areas, the one adjacent to the interchange has, the only one that has this category, where if you're 1,000 feet or more from a residential zone district, you go to 300 feet.
What about the caveat of the 30%?
That applies across all of
Yeah,
these.
so if it's a 39-story building, it'll get another,
If 15% of the units are affordable or it's fully electrified,
and did I understand you correctly when you said there's no side setbacks?
there is not size.
Between
It's TC-1 to
TC-1
TC-1.
districts.
Oh,
30 feet when adjacent to residential.
oh, okay. So these buildings can be built right up against each other?
Yeah, very similar to like a downtown.
Just like now.
Yeah, and just like commercial districts.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is a map online if you want to explore that more. It's at plan.hu.gov.org/TC1 corridors. There is a map on there that you can go to any parcel and you can click on those buffers and find out how tall buildings can be on that particular area. We talked about the rezoning process. I think Alexis covered this. This is not site plan. This is a rezoning. So when we're talking about how these standards would apply, the question came up, does it apply to existing businesses? When a new development is proposed, that new building and that new development is going to be subject to these standards. If nothing changes on that site, it's not subject to the standards. Everything there can continue in its current fashion. That's relevant because when you're talking about those standards, I just want to make it clear, if this gets rezoned, it doesn't mean that suddenly everything is going to meet these standards. It's only as new projects come in. That's going to create potentially some nonconformities. Again, just to reiterate, zoning is prospective. You can have nonconforming uses, you can have nonconforming lots, and you can have nonconforming structures. Nonconforming uses would be a gas station. If it was zone TC1, that's a nonconforming use. That can continue in perpetuity until such a time that it stops for a period of time, and then it has to comply with the uses of the district. There's no non-conforming lots because TC1 doesn't set a minimum lot size so that's not going to apply. In non-conforming structures, that's going to be the detail of on a site-by-site basis. That is, when you're proposing a development, we have built in some protections for existing buildings, but if you're altering a building, that's going to have to abide by the new standards. And so that's probably where most of the change is going to happen, particularly when you're talking about an additive development to existing sites.
Are there any property owners in the proposed district in the room?
What do you mean property owner?
Do you own land that's proposed to be
Oh, you mean
rezoned?
commercial? Oh.
Yeah, like commercial.
All right, sir, what's your question?
Oh, you're speaking, this is outside the rezoning, but sooner or later, there's going to be an impact on the structural, shall I say, the utilities going to have to be paid for by someone.
Yeah, utilities are part of every development review. And a lot of time, actually, that is a challenge of affordability in the city, because a lot of times, in order to build something, there's a hefty charge to upgrade the utilities to service that building.
And who's paying for that?
Often the developer is paying for that. I
Often,
mean,
but who?
the city, so over time, the city continually updates its infrastructure network. So the
For
city
those
makes a lot of
property owners,
investment.
For those property owners.
Across the city, we are constantly looking at our infrastructure network to see where are the priorities to fix, upgrade, but we can't meet all of those expenses instantaneously. And so if a development happens here, and the only thing we can say to that developer then is, hey, we have the capacity down the line, but in order to get that there, you're going to be responsible for this public upgrade in the street in order to connect to that larger system.
Now, you're talking about housing, you're trying to get more people and residences, of course, businesses along this transit, this TC-1 designation. Now, the only way you can do that is through public transit, because you're disencouraging public transit. Whether it's going to be buses and light rail, that's going to, I think, will have a key part in reaching your goal of high density people living in a certain area. You already said discouragement of cars because you don't plan on having too much parking space. And certainly people who live in these areas need some mode of getting to and from work. I guess the encouragement is people working downtown or in outlying areas. Now, one of the things that I've seen since I've been here for over 50 years is that the university sucks up all the properties. And they're not on a tax roll. And most of the taxes falls on the homeowners. And this is going to me, is going to really place a heavy tax on the property owners.
Well, a couple things.
To me. I know you're not charged in figuring this out. You're all used to rezoning.
Yeah.
But sooner or later, that has to be discussed, because public transit has to be the key for trying to accomplish what you're trying to do here.
100% agree. The only place that we're looking to use this zone is where there are transit districts. For example, one of the previous areas we were looking at was the State and Eisenhower corridor, and a big conversation at that time was Briarwood Mall. Should Briarwood Mall be part of that? And it wasn't. And our position on that was, the way this works is absolutely, it relies on transit. And so we're only looking where there are transit corridors. And the hope is that for that housing and those businesses to be built there, the way transit works in Ann Arbor is the frequency and the robustness of that service is going to follow demand. They will not, as much as I might love to go to AATA and say, hey, instead of 15 minutes on those buses, could you switch them to 5 minutes? Because more people will use them then. But they're demand responsive. And so as we start adding demand to that transit system by the addition of new housing, new businesses, that will support that service. As far as tax base, new development along this corridor too will actually increase tax base. Reclaiming some of those parking lots, which are not very productive from a taxable perspective on those sites, are actually going to add to our ability to provide services.
But homeowners now subsidize AATA.
You pay a millage. Yeah, all homeowners and businesses, every taxpayer in the city pays a millage.
So there's a cost that we don't have to talk about.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. My question is, what is the process now that this is in proposal? We all know on 2929 Plymouth Road, there is a proposal coming to commission for a single-story, very large parking lot building for University of Michigan Credit Union that backs directly into a residential area where I live. And I know they already have it in commission. So what is our opportunity to help go this direction and not lose out prime property for housing and mixed use?
That petition is in advance of this petition. So if this rezoning were to take its fastest track through approval, I would anticipate that credit union will have been considered by the Planning Commission prior.
So what is the timing of, now that you started this, has there already been, I heard that there's already been notices sent to area businesses to let them know if there's or is there a moratorium?
The next step of this rezoning is at the Planning Commission on November 1st. There will be a public hearing
For the
TC-1 zone. Depending on what happens with that, if it's approved, modified and approved, or postponed, if it is approved or modified and approved, then it'll progress to City Council. I would anticipate that to be on a December City Council agenda, and then that means a public hearing likely in January.
Just one more question. As part of this corridor, I know we're thinking about density and mixed use, and we had mentioned there's already 8,000 commuters that we have the pre-pandemic coming down. Is there thinking, are we working with the Transportation Commission or the city to think about bike lanes and more movement down the road? Is there expansion of the road? I mean, we see that's backed up every day.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons that we're here now in October instead of June when City Council gave that direction. Is another direction that we had was to look at how this corridor relates to transit corridors. And one of the things we've been working on is trying to address that, and it's challenging. When you look along this corridor and the other corridors where this applies, there are widely different spaces between property line and curb. Sometimes you might have 30 feet. That is a ton of space for great transit infrastructure, bike lane, street trees, you name it. Other places we have 3 or 5 or 0 feet of public right-of-way between the curb and a property line. That is not a place where we can set up the infrastructure correctly in a way that is comfortable for you as a pedestrian or a bicyclist or somebody in a wheelchair. And so one of the things we've been working on that is actually adjusting some of our expectations, that development not measured from property line but from curb line, so that we can start creating a space that gives us the flexibility long term. But when you're talking about bike lanes, and certainly when you start talking about moving curbs, there's a lot of competing demands for those roads. Vehicles are still going to be in those roads. Transit's still going to be in those roads. And so it's not as easy as just like, oh, let's get rid of this in favor of this. We have to balance all of that.
I would add a tiny bit that zoning addresses the private property. So it goes from the property line and then the private property. And that's what we do in the planning department, which is under the umbrella of the community services area. And we work very closely, like literally sitting next to them, but also talking a lot with our city engineers and our city transportation engineers. But they work in the public services department because the roads are a public infrastructure. And we try to coordinate and match and align and work together on things. And examples that Brett just mentioned, we're working together to make sure that the setbacks in the TC-1 district are sized so that we don't put a building in the way of the work that they do. But they are two separate, one regulates private property and then one. So this project will not directly impact how many bike lanes there are or if there's a 13-foot travel lane or an 11-foot travel lane. But we work with them and we coordinate, but when there's more people, housing, and businesses, so forth, along the corridor, there's a lot more incentive. It gets higher up in the priority to provide more bike lanes or separated bike lanes or something. So it's distinct, but they work together.
Okay, but just one more, and I'm sorry, on your list of buildings that or businesses that you have as TC1, I didn't see banks. I know we have 12 banks on Plymouth right now.
Banks were less tricky.
Okay.
Financial offices or financial institutions. So banks are permitted.
Okay.
The drive-through is not, but the bank is permitted.
How do you define affordable housing? Because anecdotally, even in modest apartment buildings, it seems like the rents seem very high.
City defines affordable housing by ordinance, and it is 60% of area median income. So a household attainable to somebody at or below 60% of area median income. And Alexis is going to read me that number right now off of that chart. It's depending on household size.
A 3-person family, this is, a 3-person family should be paying about $1,600 or less a month in housing.
And that equates roughly
because they have a
household income of $66,000.
Yeah, almost 67, but 66. If they have a household income for 3 people of $66,000, if they are paying a fair mark, if they're paying a normal average, they would be paying $1,600 a month.
So for that 30% height bonus, if 15% of your housing units is made affordable to households at or below that, where they are spending no more than $1,600 for a household of 3 on all of their housing expenses, that's rent, utilities, renter's insurance, then if you commit 15 of your units made affordable to those households, that's where you can get a 30% height bonus. Yes?
Is there any teeth in the process to make affordable housing happen? Because I see what's happening near me on Pontiac Trail, where they develop a whole subdivision of $600,000 cracker boxes, and they were supposed to put an apartment unit in, and they said we're not gonna. Or by Plymouth and Moore and Maiden Lane, owner-occupied housing went away. So what's going to keep builders from doing the parts of these projects that they want to do and not doing the parts that they don't want to do?
So I want to be clear. The TC-1 does not require affordable housing. But if you use that incentive to get increased height, whether it's in TC-1 or any zoning district across the city, we enter into a contractual agreement with that property owner that actually mandates that those units are checked on a regular basis. The city actually inventories and verifies income in hundreds of units across the city on an annual basis. Most of that is through federal or state funding that we have brought or partnered with to bring to ensure affordability. We do the same and can do the same when people choose to take advantage of that incentive. So we would contractually obligate them to say, as part of your obligation, you on an annual basis have to share that you are still renting to these. We actually ask for income verification. We have the benefit of knowing all rental units are inspected in the city. So that's the way we make sure that over the long term that target's been met. It's not perfect, but we put a lot of resources into making sure that it's not an empty promise.
I know I bought my house 37 years ago, and I know it's, in terms of the cost of living, it costs over twice what it did 35 years ago. I have another question about setbacks, okay? If the setback is to the property line?
It is now, but we are considering an amendment for the rear setback will always be from the property line. Side setbacks when adjacent to residential the same. We are in the process of forwarding a recommendation to the city council to modify the front setback where, I'll show you this.
Currently, as of today, there's a 0 setback minimum. Buildings could be built to the property line. And there is either a 15 or 20-foot setback requirement.
So I'm curious about the homeowners that exist right now on the edge of this district. The people in there.
That's a 30-foot setback requirement.
So that's to the property line.
That would be a rear. And
so
that would be
if you have
rear
a two-story house that's 30 feet from the setback, someone else could build another house another 30 feet from that property line that was 55 feet tall.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's probably the case today.
And how many stories is that?
55 feet is between 4 and 5 stories.
Okay, so if you have a two-story house, 60 feet away, you could end up with a 5-story house.
Right.
5-story
Right,
building.
and that is most likely the situation today.
Yeah, the commercial districts also provide for that. Yes, sir.
Maybe it's a little bit more philosophical, but I don't understand how the encouragement of more productive space, as what you're saying, which means more businesses occupying the same area.
And home cycle.
You're not.
You don't have any new homes there.
They don't have to build any homes. You just said that. They don't have to. This could be an entirely commercial expansion.
Like it is now. Yeah.
And how does that increase use of transit or bike paths or anything like that? 'Cause all the people who are coming to work there have been coming in from out of town.
Because right now, some of these businesses aren't very well connected to those transit lines.
It doesn't matter. They're not the people who are going to come in and work there are not coming from downtown Ann Arbor.
They're not going to use those transit
They're not
lines.
going to use the
They're
transit.
driving in from out of
They're going to have a
town.
very effective route from Plymouth and Novi and Westland and Canton.
So you would, and I just want to take this time, this is also not, part of this is what we're wanting hearing. So what I'm hearing from you is you don't support this because you don't see the viability of businesses and residential along that
It doesn't
corridor.
include the use of mass transit or bikes or anything.
Okay, so that's
Period.
part of what we're here to hear. Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to go back to that little white box you were just pointing to. That's 30 feet set from the residential neighbor behind it. If you change the zoning, what is the tallest building that can be 30 feet from those people's house?
55 feet.
What's it, TC-1?
That's 60
Yes.
feet.
Yes.
No, it's 80
Wait,
feet.
how does that? I don't even understand this.
When
So
you're-
you're saying the tallest is a 5-story building?
Yes.
The setback's 80 feet then.
Yeah, because
Plus the 30%, so really like a 10-story building can go.
so if this is a house, and here's the property line.
Yeah,
And then we're walking along for between this point and 80 feet, if it's 80 feet. Any building in that area, 55 feet tall. And that is most likely the current maximum height of whatever district it is.
But
And then
nothing.
if you are more than, and then when you pass the 80-foot mark,
You're talking about 80 feet from the homeowner's property line.
right. Any building in that zone is 80 feet. When you get more than 80 feet away, then the building can increase to 75 feet. And then if you are more than 300 feet away, and in that spot and in this spot that we were talking about, that means you're gonna have to cross Plymouth Road. And then on the south side of Plymouth Road, which happens to be U of M, but following the logic, then on the south side of Plymouth Road, that building then could go to 120 feet. But if you are just talking from the perspective of somebody on Briarcliff, the building behind, first off, needs to be pushed back also 30 feet from the property line. And then it can be 55 feet. There's no change from the current zoning. We are increasing the possibility as you get farther away from Briarcliff in this example.
Okay, but even over like by Bushes and where the hotel is, I don't want to see a 12, well, you know, I don't want it to be like downtown in South U area. I don't want it to be like Division and Washtenaw, where a huge building was put up there.
Thank you.
I
That's
feel
something
like
that
you're
we're working on.
ruining our neighborhood by putting in tall buildings and having practically no setback from the street.
Okay.
I object to that.
From my understanding, part of this is trying to meet the housing demand that's currently in Ann Arbor that's driving the really high housing prices. So I think this is a great idea to try and densify the already existing transit corridor, which I use regularly. A lot of fellow students that I know use regularly. So I think this is a really cool way to try and densify this area that already has the transit and to help increase opportunities for people who don't want to use cars. So
A clarification, 80 feet setback for a 55-foot building, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if they get the additional, no, I'm sorry, no, it's 80 feet.
Between 0 and 80 feet from the property line.
Yes, 55 feet.
Yeah.
But what about the additional 30% for affordable housing?
Right. If they commit and sign on the dotted line that there'll be affordable housing in it, they'll get a 30%.
So it's an 80-foot. So it's an 80-foot setback for a 80-foot
Yeah,
building,
so
right?
I can't do the math in my head. but-
Well,
71 feet.
Yeah, so it would be-
Okay,
It'd
but
be
so
71 feet if
so-
somebody committed to a
Seven
property.
stories.
All right, so that's what I'm trying to get.
But let me say though, that even if the TC-1 zoning is denied, that can still occur because the height limit is 55 feet now. And anyone who commits to either an affordability component or a sustainability component will get.
I understand, but in this new plan, there's not the same requirement for, I assume there's a requirement right now for parking spaces per.
No, the city has no parking.
There's no,
requirements.
none at all.
Right now, the city requires 0 parking. A property owner, which includes a developer,
they want.
is free to provide parking. We have some land uses, like shopping centers and offices, have a maximum parking, but there's no minimum. In the TC-1 district, that's all the same. There's no minimum parking requirements.
Okay.
There is a maximum parking requirement. It is roughly the same as what is existing for shopping centers and offices. So again, little difference. The main difference in TC-1 is it has to be proportional to the size of the building. You can't have a tiny building and a huge parking lot. You want a lot of parking, you're gonna have to propose a parking structure or put it underneath the building. So there's because we already have parking maximums for offices and shopping centers, the functional difference in TC-1 in terms of sheer number of spaces is not that different. The main difference is we will require you to somehow hide it or stack it on top of each other for efficiency. Our land is too valuable to have a sea of parking. Still have parking, but you have to smush it down and stack it up, again, so that people can walk from building to building faster. They don't have to walk across the sea of parking.
You
mentioned that the 30% increase is for sustainability and affordable housing. Did I hear you say at the beginning that no one has taken you up on that offer? Has anyone committed to that yet?
I believe there is one. And it was the Ann Arbor Housing Commission in partnership with Avalon Housing at their 121 Catherine site downtown.
Sorry.
It had a 60-foot height limit.
Okay.
And they needed 63 feet. And they are already at 100% affordable housing. So they earned like 20 feet, but they used 3.
Are they doing the same thing for on stadium?
Are they doing the same thing on Stadium?
Yeah, near the post office. Well, where the Chrysler, they were
Yeah.
automobile.
No one has actually submitted a site plan on Stadium, so officially, no one has employed it.
I've heard that somebody was looking at that for an affordable housing project. They haven't submitted anything to us. Yes, sir.
Just to get an idea of like the pace of change we should expect, following up on what Alexis just said, can you give an idea of roughly of how many parcels have been rezoned to this and how many petitions have been submitted to take advantage of it?
There were about 100, rough numbers, about 100 parcels covering 200 acres in State and Eisenhower. And there were about 200 parcels covering 200 acres on West Stadium. There have been, and State and Eisenhower was done in 2021, and West Stadium was done in 2022, and there have been 0 new developments.
I'd like to talk about the area near Upland Drive. Could you show that on the map?
I'm going one way.
So my concern is, I don't think this area is going to help the city achieve its goals. If this gets redeveloped, so I'm just kind of imagining someone taking these strip malls and redeveloping them. What they're going to put up is student housing. And with no parking requirement, they're going to fill up the entire land with buildings. Just like they've done like a Foundry lot. There's no tenant parking there. And we've seen like on the new development that was announced along Traverwood Road between 4th and 5th. There's some investor from St. Louis is funding it. So that's what I can imagine happening there. Now the problem is, filling up with students, they're all just going to walk across the street from North Campus. They're not really going to be going up and down Plymouth Road. So I see all it's really going to do is a golden opportunity for an investor to put 4 times as many units on that land as was previously possible, take a lot of profit out of Ann Arbor, not increase the goals that the city's looking for, because it's going to be full of students going across the street from North Campus. There are apartment buildings on the east and west side of that area.
It's south.
And south, yeah. Those are all full of students. That's why I'm confident saying that's who's going to live there, the students. And my son, who is a dental student, lives on Upland Drive. He rides his bike through North Campus to get to Central Campus. He's not going up and down Plymouth Road. So I don't think that's why I say I don't think this is going to achieve any goals for the city. It's going to be a windfall for a developer. And so why don't we keep the university stuff on the other side of Plymouth Road, where they're already developing, tearing down all those buildings to redevelop that as housing.
Thanks for the comment.
And I would like to add to that, in terms of the commercial restaurant properties there, they are intensely used. I mean, if you go there any evening, most of these are even destination restaurants. And yes, by the car lots are quite full. There's many on the back sides, there's many other kind of functioning things for exercise and specialty shops. And pre-pandemic, yes, pre-pandemic got very around that water is very active on both sides in regards to the streets. So it does serve the university very much.
One thing that I thought was a little strange.
Hold on, I'm going to go to some people who haven't heard.
Oh, I would just like to say oh, sure, I will say that. Hi, I'm Susan. I live off Blewett, and I work at Michigan Medicine, and I'm an avid bus rider. And so I'm in favor of this. I enjoy riding the bus every day. I would take it everywhere if I could, and I think if there was more density, like now I can't buy, you know, snow boots on this side of town. So then I have to drive to Bragg, which is totally fine, I have a car. But having such a dense area where I could buy more things, I think would encourage me to take the bus more. Being able to take the bus to work and having all the things on this side of town that we have, groceries, CVS, and so on, has prevented our family from needing to buy another car. So I'm in favor.
Yeah, if a developer comes in and agrees to put in 15% of affordable units, and then in the course of the development discovers that it's going to cost them more, and what muscle is there in the zoning process to hold their feet to the fire, to fulfill their obligation, or can they buy their way out of it by making a contribution to the city's affordable housing?
Both are possible. The muscle is a contractual agreement, and that can happen at a couple of different points. If that contract is broken prior to the completion of the development, that is, we put the condition that you have to execute this contract, we won't issue a certificate of occupancy for the building, so it can't be used. If it's something that happens after it, it's messy, frankly, but it's a contract enforcement. It says that you have an obligation to do this as part of your legal use of the properties to provide compliance with this contract and keep those units affordable. We do provide those as an option. You can either provide those options, or we will calculate a fee in lieu that you can pay into our affordable housing fund. Those then go to nonprofit service providers to develop affordable housing.
As part of this zoning, is there going to be a requirement, do you think, for more green space? So if someone's developing something to make sure it's just private. Oh no, it's already a commercial area, so if they're going to build something new, will you have requirements for?
Yeah, no, there's not huge green space requirements. We do have, we provide some opportunity for plazas and the like, but there's no elevated green space from what the business districts exist there now. Yes, sir.
Brad Fritz, live about 1.5 miles north of here. Two things I'd bring on. First, nobody's mentioned this, but we have a comprehensive plan revision we've just planned on, like,
there's cards in the back.
$500,000 to do, and it seems to me this kind of thing is complicated, and you've acknowledged that it depends on having buy-in from the public services people, the AATA, the road builders, etc. Why don't we fold this into that discussion and get those things coordinated? If you do just part of it, you can have very ugly results, I'd be afraid. So, second point, this is more personal, but it does touch on some things folks have said. I was prepared to really dislike this when I first heard about it, and I'm starting to like many elements of it, but there's one sticky point. There are things you can do to create carrots that are nice, and then there's this also, and I think it's kind of disingenuous to say that we're not trying to put in sticks to keep us from driving our cars. Okay? It says in some of the documents, the goal is to reduce vehicle miles traveled.
I want to be clear, that is a city goal.
Yeah.
The city has adopted a policy to try and reduce vehicle miles traveled.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to avoid that. That is a core element of the city's carbon climate response plan. That is a big number. This plan, I want to be clear, it allows parking. Plymouth Road will be a vehicular corridor.
But even like drive-throughs, like I hear people treat drive-throughs. I think if I opened a slaughterhouse in my backyard, I could have easier treatment than drive-throughs. And come on, I speak personally. I have mobility limits. My wife does too, as was pointed out by someone else. That car is great now. I want to keep it. Anyway, I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
I think it's worth noting that reduced vehicle miles traveled does not mean giving up car ownership. It literally means reduce the vehicle miles traveled. And we in planning can help that by enabling the things you need to be closer to your house. So that instead of a 3-mile, because you can have an amazing reduced vehicle miles traveled if you're currently driving 3 miles to Bushes and somehow we can get you to drive 1 mile to another Bushes, maybe. That's a 66% reduction in vehicle miles traveled. So there is a difference between car ownership and then also in land use where you store your car. But there's a difference between ownership and just literally how many miles you travel. If you currently are commuting 18 miles to work and it can somehow be reduced to 9, that is a 50% VMT reduction. And client sustainability, the folks in our sustainability office, like that is their goal. So that would be fulfilling every one of their wildest goals. So I just want to put that there is not a 100% direct connection between owning a car and reducing miles traveled. It's literally just reducing your miles traveled.
Yes, sir.
I have a question and then an observation. I will try to be brief. I will fail, but I will try.
I often fail.
Now, the question is this. As I understand the proposal, it is specifically that you're only talking about rezoning certain commercial zonings currently.
The 3 spots on the map, yeah.
Yes, but you're not proposing to rezone anything that is currently zoned residential or any of its variants.
Confirmed, correct.
Okay, now with that in mind, what are the foreseeable consequences on the property values of those residential areas that are adjacent or nearby to the commercial areas that are going to be rezoned? Are those values, do you think, going to remain where they are, or do you think that it is likely that they would be increased or diminished by the rezoning of the adjacent commercial properties? Yeah.
Well, I do not work in the assessor's office.
Yeah.
I do not think that residential property values in the city of Ann Arbor are decreasing, and I don't think it matters what is adjacent next to you. I think this is either neutral on property values. It could be positive depending on what it might be developed next door. There's a fantastic amenity that is developed next door, and it proves to be a very desirable amenity to the neighborhood. I know that your property value, your walk score kind of contributes. That's a big selling feature. If your walk score improves, that improves your property value. So my non-professional opinion, because I'm not the city assessor, is neutral to positive.
Some of the highest value property in the city are dense, non-car centric.
Okay, well, by that reasoning, then it would be wise for a property owner to sell a future, if you will, in their property in order to get the benefit of the increased value once this goes through. Am I correct in my reasoning?
You should talk to your tax advisors.
Well, sure, the ones that I still have the observation, pardon me, let me just get the thought in.
Sorry.
Okay, the observation is this. The residential areas locally are based on detached single-family housing. And I think it's fair to say that those who purchased their homes with the intention that this is our forever home, intended to do so in an area that was going to be largely the type of neighborhood that currently exists, generally detached single-family housing. What you're proposing now is to surround this, or at least encroach into these neighborhoods, right up to the area where the zoning changes, with high-density, high-rise housing, which means a significant change in the nature of that community. This ain't what I bargained for. And I think that's probably true of most people who thought, I really like the idea of this neighborhood as it is. And one of the things contributing to that is, I can look over here and you know what I see? Well, what I see is that I don't see a 5-story apartment building, and with one next to it, and another one there and another one here. And this is an essential change in the nature of the community that is being based on the importance of providing high-rise housing for people who don't live here yet. And I think that that's very poor planning.
So a lot of the people that live in this neighborhood use the Plymouth Road Mall or the, Kroger area, and we either walk or drive, quickly. And now you're proposing to put in these higher density resident areas. It's going to change, and it reminds me of a friend who lives in Columbus, and they did this to the short north. And it used to be a really nice area, and now it is so dense that you don't want to go there anymore. So I just wonder how, have you looked at other areas where they brought in this dense housing and now it has ruined the character, and the people that used to go and use those areas don't want to anymore?
What she said.
Thank you.
She's had her hand up a long time.
Go ahead.
Thanks.
Sorry, I'm doing my best to.
No, I know, you get it. So this is more a comment than a question, and I hope I can remember my several comments, and I'll try to make it brief. So when we've lived in Indianapolis, we've lived in Salt Lake City. My experience in Indianapolis was awful. It was a car-centric place, and there was no place to get to that was less than 20 minutes away. We couldn't ride our bikes anywhere that mattered. We moved to Ann Arbor, and we picked our neighborhood because we could ride our bike or walk to post office, grocery store, dry cleaner, library, and there was something else, and I forget what was in the priority list, but we said, hot damn, this fits all of everything we kind of need to do on a daily, weekly, etc. basis. It's all right here. This is our neighborhood, and we've been here for 25 years now because of that. So the idea of having, like, we have a house in the middle of the neighborhood, but doggone it, we can get where we want to go and do the things we want to do. I have a car, and I can drive my car, but a day running errands to Myers and then to Briar is a terrible day for me. A day where I can run my errands right here in Northeast Ann Arbor is a banner day. And the idea of being able to walk and bike and not have to have the car, because frankly my husband's car is dying and it's taking us forever to figure out what else to get. He was in the shop last week. It is nice to not be forced. Like, cars are great. Lots of us have cars, but we're forgetting here that not everybody does, and not everybody has one car per person. So having density of businesses within transit corridors and having things be closer so you don't have to walk forever. I can't tell you how much I would despise having the Briarwood Mall in my backyard, because to get to any store I'd have to walk the entire parking lot, and that's dreadful. So the idea of having, I understand the idea, and the last comment I would make, so property values, honestly, we took this place because it was accessible to what we wanted, but the last comment I wanted to make is, we have, Ann Arbor's growing, and people are coming in from Brighton, and people are coming in from Plymouth, and that means cars, and more cars, and more cars, and the ability to get around is going to get worse and worse and worse. So having people who work in the businesses that you want to frequent, the restaurants you want to go to, be able to live somewhere in the city is really good, otherwise a city dies. A city that only has elderly people who drive around and nobody who works in the businesses can afford to live there is a city that dies. So we need some of those people to be able to come here, students to be able to live here, and so I strongly support more density only along the border, not the entire city, but along these borders. I would support that.
While I have everybody's rapid attention, we are under a time crunch here. We're scheduled to end about 7:30 in deference to getting cleaned up for the library. So before I forget, I want to just make sure that's clear. We are asking for your comments. We are taking down everything we've heard today. I'll get to as many people as I can, but planning@a2gov.org. Planning@a2gov.org is an email address. Shoot us an email when you're thinking about your comments. It can be short, it can be long, it can be tonight, it can be in the middle of the night, it can be whenever. So if we don't get to your comments, we will. Yes?
Thanks, sir. Three quick questions. One, will the PowerPoint shown tonight?
Will be on the list.
Okay. Two, will staff be generating a memo containing basically or summarizing all the feedback you received tonight? I know you did for the stadium, transit corridor, and that was very helpful.
Yep.
Okay, third question. As the city implements parking maximums, has the city looked at or studied how adjacent neighborhood streets are impacted by parking overflow when parking lots at these, adjacent strip malls, if you will, are repurposed for development. Just one quick anecdotal example, and I live just off of Washtenaw, when the shopping center that contains Whole Foods was developed, the maximum there was 200 spaces. Turned out to be inadequate, and virtually not long after it opened, and so I live on streets that were impacted by that parking lot overflow. They were parking in on the neighborhood streets, customers and employees. Whole Foods later, and they have ever since, so for many, many years now, have rented the lot behind the Verizon building where all their employees park, because there's inadequate parking there. So the overflow does occur, so just my question again, has the city,
we haven't had a lot of experience with the TC-1 maximums. The maximums that have been in place for a long time, so I think that's something that would probably be better to assess once we see some TC-1 development as it relates to that. But as it relates to general parking requirements, at that time we actually had minimum parking requirements, so that development is actually meeting the minimum.
I was not on council at the time, but I know from your predecessor, Karen Hart, that it was, she stated that parking lot, I said maximum 200, I misspoke, was underserved by 200 spaces. That's what she said at that time. And I would just say that what occurred was, where do people park? They parked on the neighborhood streets. It just occurred.
I have one quick question.
Yep.
You're talking about trying to increase use of transit. Do you know if all the development along Nixon Road has increased use of the AATA, which is part of this corridor?
I don't know the answer, but I can find out how that ridership has changed.
Because that's kind of your goal, is to increase housing, and it'd be interesting to know if it had an effect.
So I'm wondering, if I'm a developer, what will this rezoning allow me to do tomorrow, if approved, that I couldn't do today?
It'll allow you to build without FAR limitations. So right now in a lot of those commercial districts, we allow the height, we allow the proximity, but we limit the overall square foot that you can build to sometimes 75, sometimes it's 200. So we are eliminating that. We're not really changing the envelope. We are changing the envelope as you get further from residential, but we are increasing the square footage that you can utilize as an incentive to try to balance, again, buildings versus parking.
So more density on
in buildings rather than car density.
So, I tried to bring up what U of M is planning. They had announced it this morning to city council members and state reps. It's campus plan, campus plan 2050. I don't know how to get online, but they actually included the Plymouth Road corridor in their proposals. This is not firm, but they included potential workforce housing on Plymouth Road, conference center hotel at the NCRC. So the university, with their parcels along Plymouth Road, is actively trying to plan, anticipate, and also plan for a transit.
Well, that's the key to the whole thing. You need the TC-1 before you can plan for the transit to the hospital.
So I don't know how to get on the Wi-Fi. So
I'm trying.
These are not, the university presented it to officials and folks just this morning. And they said all the plans will be up online. But those plans themselves are not firm. They're starting community engagement in their own planning process, and welcomes feedback not only from students, but when County Commissioner Katie Scott was there, she's also a nurse. She's like, there are 7,000 nurses that would have feelings about this too, right? A commute in and out of town every day.
Can you explain where on Plymouth Road it's going to be?
If you go to, you gotta go down. There's open houses that the university is proposing. Going down, and then land use ideas. If you go down. I know they made it really complicated. It's actually. C. So
the university is talking about the athletic campus, central campus, medical campus, and then Plymouth Road. They showed us this morning, I think it's the last one, right? So here, right, and then it's the yellow is workforce housing, student housing. This is the NCRC right here, right across from Songbird Cafe, the turquoise. They're thinking it would be a hotel conference center. It's not set in stone, but what I'm saying is, as we start this process on TC-1, which is still in process, this is our first meeting on this, right? University is already in their own process, in their own parcel.
Yet another good reason to connect with the comprehensive plan.
My question for them at this event, the last question at the event was, do you plan on buying additional parcels? or are you concentrating in these footprints? They said we have a lot to do. This is for until 2050, plan 2050. They will concentrate in these areas. And I asked, is that a promise? And they said there might be some one-offs. I said, make it zero-offs. And then concentrate on this. But I'm just, again, this is not like definite. I would encourage you to go to their open houses too. So whatever feelings you're sharing here with staff, as we go into this process, nothing's confirmed yet, please do the same with university. So, yes.
Thank you. I want to take exception to something you said. You implied that, oh, they're right on board. The university,
I didn't say they're on board. Okay. This is they're working on it.
One thing about the university that's different than the city, the university builds quality architecture. They build to last. If there's a building that's 100 years old, it's still a viable building. They use good architects. And they always have nice space. It's a little dense down in the central campus, but up on North Campus, we have beautiful, it's my favorite place to walk. There's grass, there's artwork everywhere that donors are giving to them. It's lovely, there's wildlife there, they have a lot of land. I don't object. If they want to put in a hotel or something, I know they'll do it right. I'm not worried about the university. They just seem to have a nice sense of ethics. Now, I want to go back to the premise of this whole thing. Somehow or another, you were selling this, and actually it starts from a point that, you know, oh, it's not dense enough. This is a viable, vigorous, vital corridor. There's already good transit. We have the city buses, we have North Campus buses. And I know that in a pinch, we can jump on a U of M bus and go somewhere. They're not going to kick me off the bus. But a lot of people, I live on Upland too, a lot of us are here from Upland. It's a little dead-end street. And if we can, lots of people walk, they bicycle. You know, some of the owners who were in their 80s and 90s used to walk to Kroger with their little carts. I can see other people along the bus stop on the side, is it Nixon, no, Green, no, it's not a little street, that they board the bus stop on the side road from Kroger. So you see lots of people, and you see people walking. I see the students on our street, a few that are there, and the people who work at the university who are there, nurses at the hospital and doctors. They walk down, and sometimes they either walk to work, ride their bike, or they walk across the street and jump on a U of M bus. We're right across from North Campus. So it's already a viable corridor. We have good transit. What we have are every kind of retail service that we need, and financial institutions and lots of other things. Most of the other side of the road does belong to the university. So all of what we have is on, you know, the other side, the non-university side. If you build a high-rises housing and you replace services, commercial enterprises, restaurants, grocery stores, things like that, you have data already, starting several years ago on a lot of your developments that you took out, you know, you allowed retail to be taken out with the promise that the buildings that were going in were going to have retail space below. You now have, and it had articles in the paper, places like the George and other places. You can't even give away that space in the bottom. Now they've asked for permission to convert it into art apartments because they can't get businesses or restaurants to come in. And the people said there's no parking. And even with free rent, some businesses have turned down free rent because they said they'll never break even. So you already have data. It's not an automatic thing, oh, you build it and they will come. No, you build it and sometimes they don't come. So if you displace the services we already have to stick an apartment in, how does that help us? And the other thing I want to say is, I do love Detroit, and I do like Mayor Duggan. One thing I like about him, and it's a different situation than ours, but every time a development is brought to him, anything that needs to be done in the city, his question is, how does this benefit the citizens of Detroit? And I'm asking you, how does this benefit the citizens of Ann Arbor?
That's a benefit of us.
I want to see if I understand this correctly. This new zoning, you're taking properties that have commercial zoning right now, and you're applying this new zoning so that they can be mixed use buildings.
They can be mixed use now.
They can be mixed use now. So
They typically don't though, because when you don't have floor area density to, for example, to do a commercial with residential above, when we limit 75% FAR, there's not enough floor area to accomplish those.
will this zoning allow one of these currently commercial properties to be all residential?
It would.
It would. And the zoning that they're under right now, would that would not?
That would allow them to be all residential as well.
It would?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
What's the vacancy rate in this area now? Do you know that?
I don't know it off the top of my head.
I mean, because my feeling is that, I mean, if the vacancy rate goes high enough, then there might be an incentive to buy up those properties just because this zoning change would allow higher density residential. And I agree with that former comment. I look at the George and I look at what's happening at Broadway and Maiden Lane, and you can't pay businesses to go in there. It's supposed to be mixed use, but businesses that used to be there are gone, and it appears they'll never come back.
I want to wrap it up. Thank you all.
Wait, that's a question, or it's 7:35 and we will be kicked out by the library?
Yeah. So, planning at a2gov.org. This is the first meeting. Questions, feedback, all of the above. Planning at a2gov.org. This is not your last opportunity. This comment, as said, this will be shared. It will follow any action on this process. Any other feedback we get will similarly be forwarded. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you. If you email that, does that go to the planning commission, or do you?
It comes to me and we distribute it to the planning commission and incorporate it into the summary.
Planning at A2Gov.
Planning at a2gov.org.
If you write into planning at A2Gov and say, dear planning commission, it will go to the planning commission. If you write in and say, I have a question on setback, it will not go to the planning commission. So we do read them.